Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotar Shat Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanarvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Granth Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Sai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25, The Glories of Devotional Service, X2. Nayasya Varshamanah Pumsam Varimna Sarvayoginam Varimna Sarvayoginam Vishrutau Shrutadevasya Bhuritrupyanti me asavaha Nayasya Varshamanah Pumsam Varimna Sarvayoginam Vishrutau Shrutadevasya Bhuritrupyanti me asavaha Nayasya Varshamanah Pumsa Varimna Sarvayoginam Vishrutau Shrutadevasya Bhuritrupyanti me asavaha. Nahi asya varshamana pumsam Rimna sarva yoginam Vishrutau shrutadevasya Puritrupyanti me savaha. Ayasya varshamana pumsam Na sarva yoginam Vishrutau shrutadevasya Bhuritrupyanti me savaha. Ayasya varshamana pumsam Varimna sarva yoginam Vishrutau shrutadevasya Bhuritrupyanti me savaha. Vaishnavis. Nayasya varshamana pumsam Varimna sarva yoginam Vishrutau shrutadevasya Bhuritrupyanti me savaha. Ayasya varshamana pumsam sarva yoginam Bhuritrupyanti me savaha. No, not he, indeed. Asya, about him. Varshamanaha, the greatest. Pumsam, among men. Varimnaha, the foremost. Sarva, all. Yoginam, of yogis. Vishrutau, in hearing. Shrutadevasya, the master of the Vedas. Bhuri, repeatedly. Trupyanti, are sated. Me, my. Asavaha, senses. Shaunaka continued. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. There is no one who knows more than the Lord Himself. No one is more worshipable or more mature a yogi than He. He is therefore the master of the Vedas, and to hear about Him always is the actual pleasure of the senses. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that no one can be equal to or greater than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is confirmed in the Vedas also. Eko Bahunam Yovidadhati Kaman. He is the supreme living entity and is supplying the necessities for all other living entities. Thus, all other living entities, Vishnu Tattva and Jiva Tattva, are subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. The same concept is confirmed here. Nayasya Varshamanaha Pumsam. Amongst the living entities, no one can surpass the Supreme Person because no one is richer, more famous, stronger, more beautiful, wiser, or more announced than He. These qualifications make the Supreme Personality of Godhead the cause of all causes. Yogis are very proud of performing wonderful feats, but no one can compare to the Supreme Personality of God. Anyone who is associated with the Supreme Lord is accepted as a first-class yogi. Devotees may not be as powerful as the Supreme Lord, but by constant association with the Lord, they become as good as the Lord themselves. Sometimes the devotees act more powerfully than the Lord. Of course, that is the Lord's concession. Also used here is the word Varimnaha, meaning the most worshipful of all yogis. To hear from Krishna is the pleasure of the senses. Therefore, he is known as Govinda. For by his words, by his teachings, by his instruction, by everything connected with him, he enlivens the senses. Whatever he instructs is from the transcendental platform, and his instructions, being absolute, are non-different from him. Hearing from Krishna or his expansion or plenary expansion like Kapila is very pleasing to the senses. Bhagavad Gita can be read or heard many times because it gives great pleasure. The more one reads Bhagavad Gita, the more he gets the appetite to read and understand it, and each time he gets new enlightenment. That is the nature of the transcendental pleasure. Similarly, we find that transcendental happiness in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The more we hear and chant the glories of the Lord, the more we become happy. Anatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. My dear Lord, please guide us all so that we can learn to realize and relish your glories and help others do the same. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming today morning. And today we're discussing the second verse of the 25th chapter of the third canto. Here it is described the glories of the Lord. Nayasya Varshamanaha Pumsam. Among all living beings, there is no one as exalted as him. And Vishrutau Shrutadevasya, hearing about him, Bhuri Trupyanti, one gets great joy. So, I'll do a quick, we are discussing this search for meaning as the topic. And yesterday I discussed how this is one of the longest philosophical discussions in the Bhagavatam. And yesterday I used the acronym CHIT to talk about the context, and then the implication was that the Bhagavatam is talking about how there is the search for, we all need means and meaning. Animals only look for means. Humans want meaning. And that meaning is what is provided through the scripture. So now scripture is what helps us ultimately. Yesterday I talked about how animals are regulated by nature, humans are regulated by culture. But there are many different cultures in the world. The culture that is based on scripture is what regulates humans in such a way that they can grow spiritually. And then I talked about how there is artha and there is paramartha. And the key point we discuss is when any artha, anything of value becomes the paramartha for us, then that will lead to anartha. So if somebody values money too much, if that becomes the central driving purpose of their life, then that will lead to the anartha of greed. Like that, all anarthas can be arthas taken to an excess. So now let's look at this particular verse using the same framework. If you look at the context, now generally in the practice of spiritual life, especially we could say in devotional life, there are three main components. That is, there is Bhagavan, there is Krishna, there is Bhakti, and there is the Bhakta. So Bhakta is, we need to understand ourselves to be the soul, Atma. Now the previous verse, the first verse over here, 325:1, was Kapila Sattva Sankhyata, that he is speaking the truth, the spiritual knowledge was centered on Bhakti. Now today's verse is talking about Bhagavan. What is the speciality of the position of Bhagavan? And broadly in the Bhagavatam, the Lord is envisioned in two distinct ways. That is, and that theme will come over here also. And this is a universal understanding of the conception of God. Broadly, across the world's theistic traditions, there are two conceptions of God. God is beyond nature. By nature, we refer to the word material nature or the physical world. God is beyond nature or God is within nature. Now, the word for God being beyond nature is called as transcendence. Now, we use that word very commonly, and that's fair enough. But philosophically, that God exists beyond nature. That is the transcendental aspect of God. And therefore, we have to leave this world and go to God. Now, for example, in the Abrahamic religions, in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, the transcendence of God is emphasized very much. And that means God is not within nature. And that's why often these religions have a strong aversion to deity worship. Because why deity worship? Because then God is manifested in nature. But God never manifests in nature. So, their idea is that one of the commandments is thou shalt not worship graven images. The idea is that anything that is manifested in nature is not God. It is actually the devil masquerading as God, taking people away from God. In fact, in the Islamic tradition, this is called a shirk. And the shirk is that identifying anything material with Allah, with God. And they say that Allah can forgive any sin. Allah can forgive murder, Allah can forgive rape, but Allah will never forgive the sin of shirk. That if you identify anything material with God, then that is the worst sinful activity. So now, so ideas have consequences. Philosophical conceptions have practical consequences. So the transcendence can be taken towards an extreme where it leads to all world rejection. Now, of course, political Islam does not reject the world, but their idea is that nothing material can be identified with God. That's why even any depiction of what to speak of Allah, any depiction of Muhammad is also forbidden. This is not a critique of Islam at all. I'm just giving the philosophical conception. Now, when God is present within nature, that is called as immanence. So transcendence and immanence are two opposite concepts. Now God is present in nature. This is one of the favorite ways by which scientists try to reconcile science and spirituality. So they say, okay, what is God? Gravity is present everywhere, so gravity is God. Or the electromagnetic force is present everywhere, that is God. God is all pervading, God is powerful, nothing can resist him. These are the attributes of God. So this is that basically it leads to God being very depersonalized. This leads to God being distanced. God cannot be manifested in this world, because nothing in the world can manifest God, that makes God very distant. This makes God very depersonalized. I'm specifically using the word not impersonal but depersonalized, because impersonal is a conception. But depersonalized means we consciously say that God cannot be a person, because God is distributed everywhere. So now the Vedic conception is both. God is beyond nature and God is also within nature. So God is beyond nature as Bhagavan. God is within nature as the Brahman, or rather more precisely, you could say Brahman is within. Brahman is not within nature, nature is within Brahman. Brahman is the all-pervading reality, and material nature exists within that. And Paramatma is inside, you could say more precisely. And now Bhagavan also comes within nature as avatar. So the Lord descends to this world as avatar. So in our tradition, yes, we say the holy name is transcendental. Yes, it is transcendental. At the same time, the holy name is actually an immanent manifestation of divinity, because we can utter that name with our tongues, and that raises our consciousness upwards. So why am I talking about this right now in the context? See, the Bhagavatam in Sankhya is very much the analysis of nature. And so Sankhya, the focus is often on the immanence of God. So how both these two go together, how both of these are balanced together, that is what we'll be discussing. In Sankhya, it's more on, like Sankhya is a school of thought which analyzes material nature to understand the essence of reality. So in this particular verse, what is said that God, there is no being greater than God. And in hearing about him, Vishrutau Shrutadevasya, that in hearing about that Lord, Trupyanti, one gets the supreme contentment. So in the Bhagavatam, for example, say the 7th canto, the 10th canto, this is describing the avatar descending into the world. The 3rd canto, the 5th canto, this is describing, say, the Sankhya philosophy or the Bhagavatam cosmology. This is describing how we can see God in the world. So right now, how God can be seen in the world will be described in the subsequent chapters. So the context is that Kapila is going to speak this to Devahuti. Her husband has renounced the world. She still has to engage in the world. She still has to engage